Here's our buddy Todd Zolecki, follows them carefully, MLB.com on Philadelphia. Todd, welcome. Good to have you with us here. 11-14, the Mets are way over 500. This is a very important series, more so than it should be for the Phillies on May 5th. They're in trouble right now in the NL East. Let me hear your thoughts. Go ahead.
There's no doubt, Mad Dog. They've played the Mets 6 times already. They've won only 2 of those first 6 games. As you mentioned, they're 3 games under 500, 11-14. You know, you started to feel some more frustration in the clubhouse the past couple nights because, you know, in April, right, you can say, all right, we're just getting our feet wet, shortened spring training, but now that's kind of over, and now they've started to say, listen, we need to start winning some baseball games here. You have to get on a roll. This team is too talented. They spend too much money, and so this is a big, big series. As you mentioned, the Mets, best team in the National League, arguably, record-wise. The Phillies struggling. They have to start winning some series. They just have not done enough of it the first 5-6 weeks of the season.
And I have a very, very hard schedule forthcoming. I mean, a road trip after this, the Phillies and the Dodgers. Then I have San Diego and the Dodgers in their place. Mets again. They haven't even played the Braves yet. I mean, this is a very – we're going to find out something about the Phillies in the next 20, 25 games. They're going to win 15 of them. They're in some trouble on a very tough stretch of games. Todd, let me hear your take on that. Go ahead.
Yeah, you don't want to get too buried, you know. And everybody will always mention the Astros a few years ago, and they were like 15-30, and the Nationals a couple years ago when they started out terribly. But those are the exceptions to the rules. You don't want to get buried too deep in the NL East standings or just the wild card standings in general. And they're already several games behind the Mets. And you look at the wild card standings now. As early as it is, you see the Phillies are 3-4 games back of that last wild card, and so they do. Very tough schedule coming up. They play 4 against the Mets this weekend, then they go to Seattle, then they go to L.A. for 4 on the road. Not easy. They need to start scoring a little bit more runs. They need to start pitching a little bit better in their rotation and get the ball rolling.
All right, what's the biggest concern? You know, when they pitch, they don't hit. When they hit, they don't pitch. They're throwing a little defense. I mean, what has been the culprit here the first, really, they won their first 2 games. What's been a culprit the first 2.5, 3 weeks of the season?
You know what I think it is I think it's the offense not scoring as expected. Now, scoring is down around baseball. We've talked a lot about that. But this was a team that was built to win with offense. You know, once they signed Nick Castellanos and Kyle Schwarber, the expectation was runs in bunches. And if you look at the stats, the overall stats, runs per game, they're like 9th in baseball. OPS, they're top 5. Slugging percentage, they're top 5. But it's been really kind of like high or low. So they've been held to 1 or fewer runs in 7 of their first 25 games. So a lot of those runs that they've scored have come in bunches. So you think about that lineup, you know, Harper, Castellanos, Schwarber, JT Realmuto, Rhys Hoskins, 1 or fewer runs in 7 of those 25 games. That's a big reason why this team has been struggling.
Now, they have a lot of veterans, and Harper won the MVP, and Girardi too, but you know that fan base, they're going to get feisty here pretty quick. I mean, there's no Eagle football right now. The Sixers might say goodnight this weekend, and there's no Flyers. So a lot of attention's going to be on the Phillies, and I know that fan base very well. I even sensed it with the little disgruntlement last night. We'll see how they handle that because they are going to have themselves be heard. What's your take with that?
They're already getting frustrated, Mad Dog, you know, because the expectations were so high. Now, they haven't been in the playoffs since 2011, right? So you already have that going into the season, regardless of what they did in the offseason. Right. Then in the offseason, in March, in February, they get Schwarber, they get Castellanos. Now everybody's excited. They finally go over to the luxury tax for the first time in franchise history, a $240 million payroll, $10 million over the luxury tax. And they're like, all right, this is finally the year it's going to happen. And I think everybody in Philadelphia was super excited going into the season. They take 2 out of 3 against the A's the opening weekend. And they're like, okay, this is it. This is what's going to happen. They're going to start winning some games. And then they've started to slide a little bit. You see that inconsistency. And the mindset, I think, of the Philadelphia fan is, oh, no, here we go again. We've experienced this the past few years. They make some signings. They make some additions, and it's just not turning out the way that we had hoped. Now, it's early, and I think, you know, this offense is going to hit at some point, but as we just mentioned, you don't want to get too far behind the Mets. You don't want to get too deep behind in those wild card standings.
And not only that, they also got no hit by the Mets, 158 pitches. So let's throw that into the mix, too. And a Philly fan hates the Met fans. So let's throw that into the mix, too, with the no-no. What's up with the defense? Is it as I know the third baseman made 3 errors earlier in the year. I saw him make some good plays last week. I know Harper's been in and out of the lineup with some issues there where he can swing the bat but doesn't want to throw the ball. How about this Philly defense right now? Has it been a major glaring deficiency here in the last, say, 10, 12 days?
Well, you know what's interesting is that going into the season, that was expected to be like you said, the glaring weakness of this team. Like, they're going to have to totally out-hit all of their defensive mistakes because the defense has been that bad the past several years. The defense has actually been okay, and I don't mean okay like above average. I mean okay where they're not going out there every night and costing them games. That was what happened the past 2 or 3 years. They've played good enough to win games. Now, you mentioned Alec Bohm. He had that 3-error game a few weeks ago. He had a couple bad plays the other night. Then last night he made the defensive play of the game, made a nice over-the-shoulder catch, threw out a runner at the plate. So it hasn't really been the defense. Not that the defense has been great, but it hasn't been the defense costing this team. It's been more the inconsistency offensively and maybe even a little bit of a slow start from the starting rotation.
What can you tell me about Girardi? We love him, and he knows how to handle a big market because he was in New York forever. How's he holding up? Let me hear your thoughts with him.
Well, he seems to be holding up fine, but we talked about that frustration with the fan base, and anytime a team is failing to meet expectations, the fan base always has to look at somebody, right? Who am I going to blame? Well, Joe Girardi is definitely taking a lot of heat right now for this. He enters the season in the final year of his contract. Dave Dombrowski in his second year as president of baseball operations. Joe Girardi in his original contract has a club option for 2023. Dave Dombrowski made a point to say, I'm not picking it up right now. In spring training, same thing. I'm not picking up his option. So Joe is in the final year of his contract. And that, of course, leads people to say, listen, if this team doesn't meet expectations, it's probably going to fall on Joe. Joe's smart enough. He knows how it works. He's managing in New York, managing in Philadelphia. He took out Zach Wheeler last night after 78 pitches. It was his third time through, facing a couple lefties. From a baseball sense, you kind of understood why he did it. But boy, did he get booed hard. And I think that wasn't just the move at the time.
Wow.
Yeah, it wasn't just the move at the time, in a vacuum. I think it was that move coupled with the fact that this team is not winning baseball games and fans are looking to kind of someone to pin it on.
Well done, Todd. Good job. Always a pleasure. We'll keep in touch. Appreciate you coming on here today.
Thanks.